found out that there were a lot of porcupines probably told to the royals and even to Harry when they met her, and in order to cover up.
The air in Buckingham Palace has never felt heavier. Behind gilded doors and centuries-old portraits, a truth has been buried, one that Prince William can no longer keep silent about. For years, the world has watched a family fracture in real time. But what actually happened before Prince Harry walked away? The answer isn't what you think. Right now, millions are asking the same question. Was Meghan Markle the victim of a cruel institution, or was there something else at play? Something that William saw from the very beginning, but couldn't say out loud? Before we dive deeper, ask yourself this. What would you do if someone you loved chose a stranger's version of reality over yours? What if that choice didn't just hurt you? It dismantled everything you were raised to protect. This is Prince William's truth, and it changes everything. The moment everything changed. There are farewells that mark you, farewells that strip away sleep, that replay in your mind at 3 a.m. when the palace is silent and the weight of duty presses down like stone. For Prince William, one farewell has haunted him more than any other, the day his brother, Prince Harry, chose to leave. The world cheered. They called it brave, modern, necessary. A man protecting his wife from the cruelty of an outdated system. But here's what the headlines never asked. What really happened behind those closed doors before Harry walked away? William remembers the conversations that were cut short, the warnings that went unheard, and most of all, he remembers her, Meghan Markle. Not a villain, not a victim, but someone who completely altered the way Harry saw his family, his duty, and himself. I've kept this truth to myself for a long time, William admits. Not out of fear of public opinion, but because I knew that saying it out loud could unravel everything my brother has tried to build. But silence has its limits, and now, with years of distance and perspective, William is ready to speak. Because the story you've been told, it's only half the truth. The question no one wants to answer. Let's be honest, when you think about Harry and Meghan's exit, what comes to mind? A fairy tale romance crushed by tabloid racism? A modern woman suffocated by archaic royal rules? A husband protecting his wife at all costs? Those narratives are powerful. They're clean. They fit perfectly into the hero versus villain structure we crave. But reality is rarely that simple. Here's what William wants you to consider. What if the most dangerous thing wasn't the British press or the palace protocol? What if it was the lens through which Harry began seeing everything? A lens carefully placed in front of his eyes by someone who knew exactly how to use it? Think about it. From the moment Meghan entered the royal family, every interaction, every tradition, every cautious piece of advice was suddenly reframed. Not as protection, not as guidance, but as control, oppression, attack. And once that lens was in place, there was no removing it. To understand how deep this fracture runs, you have to go back to 1997. Back to two boys, ages 15 and 12, walking behind their mother's coffin in front of millions of cameras. We grew up in the same palace, William reflects, but with two very different roles. I was being prepared to inherit the throne. Every step was planned, every emotion had to be controlled. Harry was different. He was allowed to drift off course, partly because I carried the burden of being the proper one for both of us. For years, that dynamic worked. From the late 2000s to early 2000s, William and Harry were described as unusually close. Joint tours, charity work, military engagements. They stood on the same side, facing the world together. William believed that fragile balance would last. He was wrong. In 2011, William married Catherine. His family responsibilities entered a new chapter, but the royal rhythm remained steady. Ceremony, discipline, the unspoken rule that personal life must serve collective stability. Then, from 2012 to 2015, Harry served in the military. He returned with stories very different from William's. More grounded, harsher, far less patient with old rules. William noticed the change, but saw it as a normal transition for a young man returning from the battlefield. He didn't see the storm coming. 2016, the year. Everything shifted. June 2016. Britain votes to leave the European Union. The country is shaken, the royal family is navigating turbulent political waters, and in the middle of this chaos, Harry introduces them to someone new, not a British woman, not someone who understood the royal family's delicate ecosystem, but Meghan Markle, an American actress accustomed to writing her own story and selling it to the public. From the very first meetings, there was no open conflict, no raised voices, William recalls. But with a lifetime of experience inside the royal family, I recognized something deeply unsettling. She did not enter this family to adapt. She entered with a strategy. Questions surfaced immediately, even if no one voiced them aloud. Why did everything have to move so fast? Why was the American press given access before the British press? Why was the story already being framed as victims versus oppressors? By the end of 2016, the palace was issuing unusual statements, not to confirm the relationship, but to limit media damage. To those inside, this was a clear warning sign. A personal relationship was creating institutional risk. I did not oppose my brother's love, William says carefully, but I began asking a question no one wanted to hear at the time. If this story was not controlled from the start, who would pay the price for it? Harry stopped listening. He began to see every warning as control, every caution as oppression. And it was at that moment that William realized something chilling: the past that haunted the present. Before becoming the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle had a past. Everyone does. But what concerned William wasn't the existence of that past. It was how it kept repeating. From 2008 to 2011, Meghan appeared regularly in entertainment sections as a young actress, searching for her breakthrough. She married producer Trevor Engelson in 2011. The marriage ended in less than 2 years. Many tabloids describe the breakup in harsh terms, emphasizing the speed, the geographic distance, the shifting career priorities. There was no official conclusion, but a narrative began forming in the media, moving fast, leaving fast. From 2013 to 2016, while starring in Suits, American media portrayed Meghan as someone actively building a personal brand. Articles discussed her lifestyle blog, The Tig, her connections in entertainment, her hands-on approach to managing her image. In Hollywood, that's normal. In the royal family, it's a risk signal. During that same period, outlets reported strained family relationships, distance from certain relatives, disagreements played out publicly. The accuracy of individual details was always debated, but the common thread was clear. Meghan's personal relationships rarely ended quietly. Then came 2016. Within months of her relationship with Harry becoming public, international media had already constructed two opposing narratives: Meghan as victim of the British press, and the royal family as a cold, outdated system. These stories spread rapidly, especially in the United States, where the idea of a modern woman confronting an ancient institution was warmly received. What made me cautious wasn't the support Meghan received, William explains. It was the speed at which a complete narrative took shape. In a very short time, the articles already had characters, motives, and conclusions. And when a media narrative is framed that early, everything that follows gets pulled in the same direction. So ask yourself, was this narrative organic, or was it engineered? Early 2017, the rift between William and Harry didn't begin with shouting. It began with a conversation, one that Harry would later describe as controlling, but William saw as survival. According to several royal sources, William spoke to Harry privately, not to forbid, but to caution. Slow down. In the royal family, slowing down isn't control. It's protection. It's giving yourself time to see clearly, to understand what you're stepping into, to separate genuine love from a beautifully constructed narrative. Harry didn't accept that advice. And that was the first time William realized his role as older brother no longer held weight. At that moment, William admits, I understood something terrifying. Harry was no longer listening to family. He was listening to someone who had convinced him that family was the problem. By the end of 2017, Harry and Meghan began assembling their own media team, separate from the traditional royal communications structure. The press called it proactive. Inside the palace, it was seen as a declaration of independence. When royals start telling their stories in different directions, unity begins to dissolve. 2018. The Wedding and What Came After. May 19, 2018. The world watched a fairy tale wedding. Millions celebrated. The optics were perfect. A modern biracial American woman joining the British monarchy. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. According to royal observers, Meghan reportedly declined several customs, including working with long-serving royal advisors. She questioned processes that were considered non-negotiable. For Harry, it was about protecting his wife. For William, it signaled a fundamental lack of respect for a structure that had stood for centuries. I understood wanting to modernize, William reflects, but modernizing means evolving within the system. What I witnessed was something different, an attempt to rewrite the rules entirely, without understanding why they existed in the first place. After the wedding, the third and most significant action occurred. Harry and Meghan requested a level of media control and security unprecedented for non-working royals, when the palace couldn't meet those expectations. Discontent began surfacing publicly through carefully placed remarks. This was William's breaking point. Any individual request could have been negotiated, he explains. But when those requests were broadcast to the media as evidence of being oppressed, the royal family was forced into a defensive position. And when the monarchy goes on the defensive, we stop being a family. We become an institution under siege. Think about that dynamic. When does protection become control? When does reasonable caution become oppression? It depends entirely on who's telling the story. 2019. The point of no return. By 2019, the actions had accumulated into a full crisis. Harry and Meghan split from the shared royal foundation, no longer working alongside William and Catherine. The media called it an independent decision. To the family, it was a withdrawal from their shared front. From that point on, private conversations between the brothers nearly ceased. No more direct exchanges. No more off-the-record talks. Everything had to go through advisors, letters, or be filtered through the media. They were brothers who no longer spoke as brothers. The final and most painful moment came when Harry no longer believed his family was trying to protect him. Every warning William gave was interpreted as manipulation. Every expression of caution was labeled oppression. When a man believes his wife is being unjustly treated by an entire system, William says quietly, he will burn every bridge behind him. October 2019, the Africa tour. In a televised interview, Harry admitted he was not okay. Meghan shared that no one had asked if she was okay. To the public, it was vulnerability. To the royal family, it was a boundary crossed. Private emotions made public without going through proper channels. What followed was rapid escalation. Sources revealed that Harry and Meghan were quietly negotiating a part-time royal role, remaining members of the family while pursuing independent commercial projects. Internally, this proposal was seen as dangerous precedent. The monarchy cannot maintain neutral symbolism while allowing commercialization of royal status. Then came the bombshell. January 8, 2020. The announcement that shattered everything. On January 8, 2020, Harry and Meghan announced on social media their intention to step back from senior royal duties before any final agreement was reached with the family. The world called it Megxit. To the royal family, it was unprecedented. An institutional decision announced like a personal press release. That moment, William says, his voice tight with emotion, was when I realized we had completely lost him. Not to love, not to conviction, but to a narrative that required us to be the villains for his story to work. Emergency meetings were held at Sandringham. William took a firm position. There could be no half an arrangement. Either stay with full duties or leave completely, separating titles from benefits. The Sandringham Agreement was announced. Harry and Meghan would step down, not use their titles commercially, repay renovation costs, and relocate to North America. On paper, it was a resolution. In the family, it was the deepest cut yet. People think it ended there, William reflects, but that's when it truly began, because once they left, the story didn't stop. It escalated. The question, everyone's asking, who controlled the narrative? After Megxit, many asked, who initiated it? But the more accurate and unsettling question is, who controlled the narrative? Because in the media age, Whoever controls the story controls reality. According to media coverage from late 2019 through 2020, Meghan Markle didn't enter the royal family merely as a wife. She entered with the skills of a professional storyteller, the ability to frame issues, choose moments, and position the public as ultimate judge. The early moves weren't loud. They were precise. Private briefings with U.S. media, prioritizing international platforms over traditional palace channels, shifting focus from institutional context to personal emotion. Each action on its own was perfectly legal, but together they formed a trajectory. This is when Meghan placed a lens in front of Harry's eyes, William explains. A lens through which every royal action, even those meant to protect, was reinterpreted as unjust treatment. Once that lens was in place, all future events aligned with a single conclusion. The pivotal moment came with the part-time proposal. On paper, it was compromise, but according to insiders, it broke precedent, retaining titles while pursuing commercial ventures. To the royal family, this was dangerous. To Meghan, it was optimization, preserving symbolism while expanding personal agency. When the proposal was rejected, the narrative shifted instantly. From compromise to escape, from difference to oppression, and once that narrative shifted, there was no turning back. The interview that changed everything. March 7, 2021, the global interview aired. Accusations were made in highly emotional tones. The royal family, having chosen not to play the media game, couldn't respond proportionally. The result? A verdict rendered by public opinion, with the accused expected to explain themselves while the storyteller held all the power. Meghan's role wasn't in every word spoken, William observes. It was in the overall strategy. She understood the rhythm of modern media, the structure of narrative, and the truth that emotion beats fact on live television. Harry, carrying deep wounds, was guided to believe leaving was the only moral path forward. What makes this so devastating isn't a single betrayal. It's the gradual narrowing of options. With each retelling, Harry's space to maneuver shrank. Staying would mean betraying the story already told. Turning back would mean admitting the lens was wrong. And once no return path remained, leaving became inevitable. Meanwhile, William stood on the other side, not telling his story, not debating on air, not responding to every claim. To the public, it looked cold. To the institution, it was survival discipline. But in the age of narrative, discipline always loses to emotion. After leaving in early 2020, Harry and Meghan didn't just exit an institution. They walked away from an entire ecosystem. Security, finances, titles, silence, all guaranteed. Initially Canada, then quickly California. Montecito, to be precise. An exclusive affluent area home to Hollywood's power players. Their multi-million-dollar estate wasn't just luxury. It was a statement. We no longer belong to the British royal family. Their children, Archie and Lilibet Diana, were born outside the system. Royal blood, but not raised within the monarchy. Family life has been described as intentionally ordinary. Rare appearances, no official portraits, no royal tours, just carefully chosen moments. Enough to signal happiness, but never enough to allow deeper access. But family life is only half the story. The other half, and most controversial, is their post-royal career. Immediately after stepping down, they signed high-profile media deals. The press called it financial independence. To the royal family, it was unprecedented. Former royals monetizing royal narratives for public consumption. Meghan returned to a familiar role: storyteller, producer, narrative driver. Projects focused on trauma, pressure, feminism, fighting systems. Harry appeared as the emotional witness, bringing royal memories, pain, lived experiences into the light. But here's the haunting question. Is this truly freedom? Or simply a different kind of pressure, one that pays better? According to reports, Harry struggled more than Meghan with the transition. For her, Hollywood was familiar ground. For Harry, this new world offered no protective protocol, no clear boundaries, no media off-limits. Every personal memory became content, and once content generates value, silence becomes a liability. What happened to the royal family? When Harry and his family left in 2020, it wasn't just a personal rupture. For those who remained, especially William, it was a complete restructuring. Fewer people, fewer voices, greater pressure. Roles that were once shared now had to be absorbed. Royal tours, patronages, symbolic duties didn't disappear. They were redistributed, and most of that weight fell on William and Catherine. The first shift came in how the monarchy operated. William prioritized stability, fewer public statements, fewer controversial projects, focus on well-established pillars. This wasn't conservatism, it was risk reduction. Catherine became the image anchor. While media debates raged, she maintained calm, consistent presence. British media noted a clear transition, the royal family returning to traditional language, endurance, discipline, steady presence, not as counterattack, as de-escalation. Privately, William and Catherine became more guarded. Their 3 children, George, Charlotte, Louis, were shielded from public discourse. Few casual images, few intimate moments. This choice sent a message. The future of the monarchy would not be shaped by today's conflict, but the biggest change was succession. When King Charles III ascended, William entered the stage of preparing for real power earlier than expected. There was no longer a buffer in the form of a younger brother sharing the load. All eyes turned to him as the lone point of continuity. In that context, William chose absolute media discipline. No combative interviews, no behind-the-scenes stories, no point-by-point rebuttals. To the public, this sometimes felt cold. To the institution, it was a firewall, preventing the narrative from dragging the monarchy into emotional spiral. The unspoken letter, a brother's final word, William's voice, steady but filled with years of restrained emotion. Harry, I've written these lines in my head many times and deleted them just as often, not because I have nothing to say, but because speaking out can sometimes push things further apart. But today, I choose to write, not for the press, not for history, for you. I still remember those rainy mornings in Kensington when we would sneak out of bed early just to run down the long hallway, our footsteps echoing like a private joke. Back then we had no titles. We were just 2 brothers, one carrying responsibility, the other laughing. I thought I would carry for you forever, as I was taught to. But I was wrong about one thing. Carrying doesn't always mean holding on. When you left, the world called it courage. Some called it betrayal. I don't use those words. To me, it was a choice, locked in place, made in a moment where every other door felt like a trap. I understand that feeling. The sense of being pushed to the point where only one exit seems bright enough, because someone's holding the light at the end. Since then, every conversation has had an audience. Every silence has been interpreted. And I've come to understand, even blood brothers can lose each other in the crowd. I stayed. Not because I'm stronger, but because someone had to stay. Stay to keep the rhythm, to stand before the old doors, to say, we are still here when the winds changed. Staying wasn't winning. Staying was enduring. Enduring questions with no easy answers. Enduring the coldness of misunderstanding. Enduring the pain of hearing your name in a headline instead of hearing it called by someone who loves you. I learned selective silence. Not because I don't have my own truths, but because every truth spoken demands another truth in response. Before long, family becomes an endless series, a show with no ending. I refused that. I chose to leave part of our story never broadcast. There were times I asked myself, if I had said something different that day, if I had slowed down a beat, if I had been less right. But history doesn't run on what-ifs. It runs on consequences. And the greatest consequence is this. We learn to live in silence without one another. That is both frightening and necessary. Like a scar that teaches a body how to avoid the blade next time. I watch my children grow and understand something very simple. Children need consistency. They need to see adults not rush to burn bridges, even when those bridges are cracked. I want my children to know that some things are held together by endurance, not eloquence. I want them to know that family can hurt, but it doesn't always have to win. I also watch your children grow from afar. I'm glad you've given them a peaceful home. I'm glad they live outside lights they never chose. Though we don't agree on every path, I never doubt your love for them. And I hope when they're old enough to read this, they understand that this separation did not begin with them. And it should not end with them. You've spoken about freedom. I believe you. But I also learned that freedom has a price. That price isn't always paid in money. Sometimes it's paid in dinners with empty chairs, in calls left unanswered, in being consistent with a story even when the heart wants to say something different. I'm not writing to pull you back. I'm writing to keep a space open. A space with no cameras, no scheduled broadcasts, just 2 chairs and time. Time that has been harsh to us, but is also the only thing that knows how to soften sharp edges. If one day you want to talk, not to be right, not to be believed, just to be heard, I'm here. I can't promise everything will heal. I can only promise not to make it worse. Because with some wounds, the kindest thing we can do is let the bleeding stop. Your brother, Prince William. So here we are, at the end of William's truth. And if you've made it this far, you already know. This story doesn't have heroes and villains. It has humans making impossible choices under unbearable pressure. William doesn't blame Meghan for being ambitious. He doesn't blame Harry for protecting his wife, but he does acknowledge something the public refuses to see. A narrative was constructed, a lens was placed, and once that lens distorted every memory, every tradition, every act of love into evidence of oppression, there was no way back. The most shocking part isn't what Meghan did, it's how the entire family let it spiral out of control. How silence was mistaken for coldness. How caution was reframed as cruelty. How 2 brothers who once walked side by side behind their mother's coffin now stand on opposite sides of the world. But here's what William wants you to understand. The door isn't shut, it's just not wide open. Because once a conversation becomes part of a broadcast, it ceases to be a conversation. And in a world obsessed with taking sides, the hardest thing to do is leave space for nuance. You've heard William's side. You've seen the timeline. You understand the questions that were never asked. So now we ask you, was Meghan a victim of a cruel institution, or a strategist who knew exactly how to control the narrative? Did Harry make a brave choice, or was he guided into a corner where leaving felt like the only option? Can 2 brothers ever truly reconcile when their stories require different villains? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. Which side will you choose? Or will you dare to stand in the uncomfortable middle, where truth is messy and no one gets to be completely right? If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, the full story, not just the headline, stay with us, because the truth about the royal family isn't found in a single shocking statement. It's found in the years of silence, the warnings ignored, the boundaries crossed, and the final decision that left 2 brothers standing on opposite sides, with no way back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking. And most of all, thank you for caring enough to ask the harder questions.